So it's no secret by now that Dragon Ball is one of my favorite franchises to ever grace my eyes. So in anticipation for Dragon Ball Super Hero just coming up in just a couple days, I decided to go through the entire journey of Dragon Ball in anticipation for this movie. Because for me personally, it's been a long time since I've actually gone through Dragon Ball. When I originally started, because I'll be transparent about this, I am one of the Dragon Ball fans who never watched the original Dragon Ball and just sort of started with Z. And that's how it's really been up until very recently. When I heard that this movie was coming out and the trailer started rolling out, I decided, you know what? I'm gonna rewatch it. I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna go through that whole journey once again. When it dawned on me, it's just like, you know what? I've never watched the original Dragon Ball. I knew the story roughly, but I never watched it in its entirety, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start from the very beginning. Come April 1st, I don't know why I chose then, but as it became closer and closer to when the movie was supposed to come out, I decided, you know what? I should probably start soon, just because, it's hundreds of episodes. April 1st, I pulled up Crunchyroll and then clicked Dragon Ball English Dub Episode 1, and then the rest happened. So yeah, like I talked before in my reaction previously to Broly, that I'm going to be doing a video talking about just my experience with this binge. And for the sake of it, I'm going to be splitting this video into 3 parts. The first part will be talking about the original Dragon Ball, then we'll be talking about Z, and then we'll be talking about Super. First of all, original Dragon Ball. Like I talked about, I've never watched it fully in its entirety. Again, I knew the key points to hit. I knew how in the first episode Goku and Bulma meet, she shoots him in the face and hits him with her car, and yeah. I knew that at some point Goku meets Master Roshi, and then him and Krillin meet, and then they train under him. They go to the World Martial Arts Tournament, Goku fights Jackie Chun or Master Roshi. I knew him and Grandpa Gohan reunited at some point. I didn't really know the context of that. I knew about him and Tien having their fight and how Tien technically won their match. Then, of course, Krillin being killed by Tambourine, King Piccolo, and all the events of that. And then the end, where Goku and Piccolo have their fight at the tournament. That was roughly all that I knew about the original Dragon Ball. And going into Z, that's all you really need to know. Because even in Z, they do a lot of flashbacks to original Dragon Ball, so it's like, do you really need to watch it? No, but going through original Dragon Ball now, as a lifelong pretty much Dragon Ball fan, I never realized how good original Dragon Ball actually is. It's like I never realized just original Dragon Ball does such a good job at establishing, it sounds stupid saying this just because it's like, of course it does a good job introducing the characters because that's when you're supposed to meet them for the first time. It's just weird going through original Dragon Ball for the first time, with all of the knowledge of Z and Super and everything. It kind of makes you sad because it's like all these characters just become so, I don't want to say irrelevant, but they peaked in Dragon Ball. Characters like Master Roshi, Tien, even Yamcha. I was so surprised how much I loved Yamcha. If I was knew nothing about Dragon Ball and I just watched OG Dragon Ball for the first time, Yamcha would probably be one of my favorite characters. And that's not even in an ironic way. It's just because it's going into Z and everything forward, he just becomes a joke. It's the same thing of him, you were killed by a Cyberman, blah, blah, blah. But in OG Dragon Ball, it's Yamcha was a warrior. He was a good rival for Goku at one point. Him and Tien had their rivalry for all of 5 episodes. He was pretty much the Vegeta before Vegeta came around. He was always fighting the villains before Goku did, and then, he fought Jackie Chun in the tournament and then lost to him. Then he fought Tien in the next tournament, lost to him. He wasn't so much a gag character until Z. And that was another thing. The voice acting in Dragon Ball is actually really good. I do understand OG Dragon Ball was dubbed after Z and all that, they did Z first, obviously. I don't know did original Dragon Ball, I don't know if it actually aired on Cartoon Network. I don't feel like it would have, because there's a lot of things in original Dragon Ball that would not fly nowadays. A lot of, accents used for characters, a lot of interesting sexualizations. Definitely a showing of the time. All the Earth characters, it's I really loved Bulma. I've always loved Bulma, but in original Dragon Ball, it's you really see her start and everything. It's her just being a kid. And again, it's just I kept finding myself being man, it's gonna be such a change. It was one of those things where I was watching original Dragon Ball, it's man, I almost don't want to go into Z. I almost don't want to watch Z because it's it's so different so quick. And it's not really a smooth transition either, like, because I'll be honest, once I watched the last episode of Goku versus Piccolo and that's pretty much where I stopped. Because I know that the last, like, couple episodes are Goku and Chi-Chi's adventure. I watched the scene, though, at the end where, like, they got married, you know, the last 10 seconds. Because that scene is cool. Because, like, it ends with the narrator being like, Goku's adventures will continue in Dragon Ball Z. And it's like, oh, that's a great setup. That's another thing. Again, I made a video a while ago talking about the ultimate way to watch Dragon Ball. And again, that's the list I pretty much used to watch it. When I got to Z, I changed a couple things. But again, going back to original Dragon Ball, there were so many scenes, it's like the fights and whatnot, it's like, it's just so clean. Like, obviously the animation changes a lot going into Z as well. A lot of it's just so crisp and clean. It's like a lot of reused animation, obviously. It's not exactly something that changes, but one of my favorites that I really look back on is the Tien arc, I guess, going into the first World Martial... Wait, is it the 21st? God, I never remember, because it's the 25th is the Buu Saga, they skipped the 24th, 23rd was Piccolo, 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament. Underrated voice actors, I'd say Tien's voice actor, because it's like, it's a lot of... Like, obviously a lot of the other characters scream a lot, but Tien, it's like a lot of screaming for him. I forget his name, but, you know, Tien's English voice actor is so good. He really gives his all in that arc in OG Dragon Ball. Again, it's just one of those things where it's kind of sad because, you know, you go into Z, it's like Tien has his moments in Z, but it's not as many as OG Dragon Ball. Because especially like going into, it's like hearing the stories versus seeing them. That was such a trip going into OG Dragon Ball because there's a lot of scenes as well and stuff that happened where it's just like, oh, that's interesting. There was a lot of stuff where it's like I genuinely was seeing it for the first time and being surprised and shocked. Like, it's looking back on, it's like, I wish I was writing some of this stuff down, because now it's been at least 3 months since I finished OG Dragon Ball. There's a lot of stuff that I've kind of forgotten now. I mean, just a lot of stuff that was just kind of forgotten. The flying Nimbus, like, Goku used it constantly. Like, even all the way up to the end of Dragon Ball, it's like Goku never flew. But then you go into Z, and then all of a sudden he just knows how to fly. I mean, it makes sense that people would have learned how to do that. You know, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Dragon Ball, I was much more there for, like, the character interactions and moments than the fight. Because it's like a lot of the fights I knew the outcome of, or at least, like, I knew how they would end ultimately, because I just never realized just Goku, as a kid, he rarely had a fight in which he was outmatched. It's also a thing, it's like there's a lot more fights in OG Dragon Ball where it's like they've become my favorites, because my favorite fights, not just in Z but in anime in general, are where it's a good back and forth. Like, I love a good rival fight as opposed to it just being a squash match where one side just completely obliterates the other. There was a lot of that, mainly the tournaments and whatnot, like the Goku vs Jackie Chun, Goku vs Tien, even Goku vs Krillin for a little bit, but it's like for the majority of Dragon Ball, it's like Goku was always in control of the situation. It was a lot of the same joke, I will say, where it's just like, oh, you're just a kid, what can you do? But then Goku just completely obliterates them. Also, Goku was very ruthless as a kid. That is something that's changed, I will say. Like, you figure it would be the other way around, where Goku was kind-hearted as a kid, but a little more ruthless as an adult. It just makes you realize, it's like, Goku, as an adult, doesn't kill too many people. As a kid, he killed so many people. In Super, he always gave people that chance. And in Z as well, it's like he always just gave him the benefit of the doubt. But in Dragon Ball, it's like he killed pretty much everyone he fought. I mean, every villain, pretty much. Like, he killed all of King Piccolo's minions. He killed King Piccolo. Like, he killed everyone in the Red Ribbon Army. And that was another thing, like, watching the Red Ribbon Army arc, it's like, that arc was really good. Especially the last episode of that, it really makes you like, at the setup for that really makes you feel it's like this could be the end, but obviously it wasn't. That was one of the arcs that I was really paying attention to. It's just like, oh man, I can't wait for Super Hero, because Super Hero again is going to be very Red Ribbon Army oriented, as well as going into the Cell Saga and Z as well. It's like some decent setup there. You got a lot of blowback just from what Goku did in that arc. And then the Fortune Teller Baba arc, well, not my favorite, was decent. Like, I liked the tournament aspect of it. I loved Goku's fight with Grandpa Gohan, and I loved that Super references that later in the Tournament of Power arc. And then the King Piccolo arc. That one was weird for me. King Piccolo is something that's referenced throughout the remainder of Dragon Ball. It's just like, oh, he was this big threat to Earth and whatnot. While he was, the fight between him and Goku, while cool, for me, it's like it didn't feel as climactic as everything that comes after made it seem like it was, because Goku was pretty much trouncing on King Piccolo the whole time. And while I know, because of what I know, going into the future, like obviously Goku's a Saiyan, he has the whole Zenkai boost, and obviously that's really potent when he's younger, and he was getting his ass beat to the brink of death a lot as a kid, which does explain why he got really strong. King Piccolo had to resort to using Tien as a hostage to get hits on Goku, and in the end Goku still won. Again, it's one of those things. I love the arc as a whole. I love the fact that King Piccolo just took over the world for a good chunk of time. Like even going into Z and all that, it's just like, how do people not look at Piccolo and shiver a bit? It's like they didn't do with King Piccolo what they did with Majin Buu and wished for everyone to forget about King Piccolo. It's like everyone still remembers King Piccolo, especially Piccolo Jr., like going into the tournament where Piccolo just completely nuked the whole of the World Tournament Island. You figured people'd still look at him and be like, oh god, it's Piccolo. Overall, like Dragon Ball was really fun to watch for the first time. A lot of cool moments. A lot of characters that like would show up briefly and either would be killed or just would never show up again. Launch. It's like after the climactic fight with Goku and Piccolo, which also that was amazing fight, and now seeing that with full context, it's like, oh, so good. We now go into Dragon Ball Z. Z was interesting for me because, as you know, there's a lot of different versions of Z, as I've talked about. There's the two English versions. There's the English version that has the Japanese music, and then there's the American broadcast version of the English dub with the Falconer music. Or for the first couple episodes, it's not Falconer, but it's still different music. I chose to watch pretty much the beginning of Z all the way to Goku's fight with Vegeta in the English dub with the Japanese music with the Kikuchi score, just because, you know, Falconer wasn't really a factor until about the Frieza saga. So I was like, you know what, I'd prefer to listen with the Kikuchi score, and that made a difference, honestly. First couple episodes already is such a huge change going into from Dragon Ball to Z, just because, well, obviously, first thing right off the bat, within the first 5 episodes, Goku fucking dies. Z was a weird thing for me, because obviously I'm more familiar with Z than I was with Dragon Ball, obviously, because I grew up with Z. But it's like, going into Z with this whole new light and context of watching original Dragon Ball was different. I mean, mainly in the first couple arcs, just because, you know, once you get well into Z, you get into the flow of things again. It's like by the time I got to Frieza, yeah, I'm in the Z mode now. Like watching the Saiyan saga, it's so weird because it's like, obviously, because, you know, you go through the whole Dragon Ball, you meet all these people, like, you know, Tien, Yamcha and everything. It's like they're awesome, they're strong. You go into Z, they die immediately. So Yamcha, Tien, Chaozu, Piccolo, they're all killed in the first battle. It made me view Gohan in a new light in the Saiyan saga. So it's like Gohan, by that point, he's only 5 years old. I'm sure he's been told and heard all these stories of, like, the original Dragon Ball, like the Z team defeating King Piccolo, like, fighting in the tournaments, just, like, they're this group of friends. It's just like, oh, man, like, Dad, you're awesome. You jump forward to Z, and he has to watch all of them die before his eyes. And it's like, that already, it's like, I get why Gohan later gives up fighting. It's just death. I then chose to watch from the Vegeta fight all the way to the end of the Frieza saga. I chose to watch that in the Kai version. I know Kai is very mixed with people, but it's like, for me, I had the most nostalgia watching the Frieza saga in the Kai as a kid, because I watched it as it aired. And honestly, I prefer it that way just because the Frieza saga is very long. Like, let's not stunt. And while there's some parts that are iconic in the original version, I prefer the Kai version of a lot of scenes of the Frieza saga, just because, one, it's cut down and that helped for this binge. Also, the voice acting, I'm like, I don't care. The voice acting in the Kai is way better than the original English dub for the Frieza saga. I've always talked about, it's like my favorite arc overall in all of Dragon Ball is still the Cell saga. But like going through Z again, I was like, I wonder if that's still the case. Because after I finished the Frieza saga, I was like, you know what? Frieza saga was always my second favorite, to be fair, but it's like, it might be neck and neck now. Especially just the Ginyu Force and everything. It's like the Frieza saga is so iconic. Pretty much for the rest of Z, I watched it in the original English dub with the Falconer music, because for me, that's the most iconic, and that's where Falconer really hits his stride with his music, is the Cell saga and the Buu saga. That was a jarring change though, just because, you know, going from the different music styles of Z, it's like I started with Kikuchi, and then I went to the Kai, and then now I went to Falconer. It's like there's a little bit there where it kind of felt like I was watching different shows, but man, going from Kai and like watching that next episode and hearing, Cal Herbe going previously on Dragon Ball Z, and hearing the dun 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 dun. It's like, oh, I'm back 10 years in the past now. That's one thing I've also realized about Z. While Goku is part of all the major battles, the Android saga and Cell saga specifically, it's like Goku seriously takes a backseat. I really looked at it, it's like there's no point in the Android or Cell saga where Goku is the strongest for once. Obviously by the end of the Frieza saga, Goku is the strongest. It's like going into the Android saga, it's like Goku has the heart virus and everything, but even then it's like Vegeta shows up as a Super Saiyan and he's stronger. And then obviously the androids show up and they're stronger than everybody. Even when Goku recovers, it's like Trunks and Vegeta come out, they're stronger briefly. But even then, after Goku and Gohan come out of the hyperbolic time chamber, it's like one Cell is at his perfect form. So it's like he's the strongest there. It's just crazy also knowing it's like Goku, after they left the hyperbolic time chamber with Gohan, it's like he knew that whole time and you can see it. It's like he knows. It's like despite already obviously knowing like Gohan would be the one to defeat Cell, like Goku's confidence, like after he leaves, just talking about just like everyone being like, so are you stronger than Cell? And Goku's like, I don't think so. I think he could easily beat me. But he's still like, nah, that's fine, we're gonna win. It's like he knew. And there are even moments when Goku was fighting Cell. It's like I think Trunks or someone says just like, it's like I think Goku can really beat Cell. And Vegeta gives a look to Gohan. It's like Vegeta was already catching on pretty early. It's like it's gonna be Gohan. And of course there's always been the debate. It's just like, could Goku have beaten Cell? It's like rewatching, it's like no, he couldn't have. Cell was holding back against Goku. It's like he didn't go full power until after Gohan went Super Saiyan 2. Like that's one of my favorite power-up sequences. And that was just another thing, going into the Gohan Cell fight, there were so many moments with Goku where he was like shaking. He realized Cell was holding back a lot against him, but also the fact that it's like Gohan is so much stronger than I think Goku even realized. But then going to the Buu saga, this one was one where I knew it was gonna be a pretty big change. This one was the main one where I was just like, I wonder if this is gonna be any different. Because the Buu saga, obviously, if you do a consensus of people, it's probably their least favorite arc of Z. And while for me, it's also the case, I still think it's fucking amazing. To a point. Because definitely rewatching it, the Buu saga starts really strong. Also, I never realized it's like the fight between Goten and Trunks in the junior division is pretty kick-ass. Everything with Babidi and Dabura, and then Majin Vegeta, obviously, it's like that all is insanely good. I knew it as well because going into the Buu saga, my favorite fight ever is Majin Vegeta versus Goku. Like I'm able to watch that fight like just on its own, like at any time. But going into it, watching it through the show, I knew it was a thing where it's like they shouldn't be fighting because, the energy that they take from each other will be going back to the ship to revive Buu. It's set up really well in the show where it's like, okay, no, they really should stop fighting. So maybe realize like, maybe I shouldn't like this fight as much, but I can't not because it's kick-ass, it's fast, it's amazing, and I love it so much. But then yeah, Buu and Majin Vegeta and his Vegeta's sacrifice, that's still amazing. It's like even though Vegeta's sacrifice was a waste, it was closure for his character at the time. But yeah, going through the rest of the Buu saga, it's like into the fusion and Super Saiyan 3. That's for me when the arc starts dipping a bit for me. When it starts dipping for me is when Super Buu comes into play. Because even then it's like Goku going Super Saiyan 3, Gohan starting his Z-Sword training. It's like that's all great. Yeah, it's once Evil Buu eats Good Buu and becomes Super Buu, that's when it starts. I'd say for most people as well, that's when it starts dipping a bit. Because once Gotenks starts fighting Super Buu in the hyperbolic time chamber, I'm gonna be completely open and transparent. That's when I started skimming. Like that's when I just started fast forwarding. Cause I was just like, I'm all for comedy and whatnot, but like this is too much. Like I pretty much skipped the entirety of Gotenks fighting Super Buu, pretty much all the way up to when Ultimate Gohan shows up, because that's when I was like, all right, all serious now. Mostly serious. Also, the Ultimate Gohan versus Super Buu fight, I never realized how short it actually is. It's not a long fight. I think it's like 2 episodes. Pretty much once Super Buu blows himself up, that's when the fight's over. Also, going into some Dragon Ball debates here. I will say, because like there's the thing of like Gohan was the strongest Z fighter at the end of Z, or it's like, but no, Gohan in terms of raw power by the end of Z was the strongest. Like Ultimate Gohan definitely beat Super Saiyan 3 Goku at that point. But in terms of obviously experience and technique, Goku obviously has Gohan beat there. But that leads to the other point of contention. What was the strongest Buu by the end of the Buu saga? It's like, was it Kid Buu or was it Buuhan? obviously it was Buhan. I don't know why that's still a debate to this day. The only thing it's like, yeah, Kid Buu, like there's the line of Vegeta saying it's like, why is his power increasing instead of decreasing? It's like, it's increasing from the point he was at, like when he was like the yoked Buu. Obviously Buhan's stronger because like he has Super Buu's already base strength. Then he had Gotenks, then he has Piccolo, and then he has Ultimate Gohan. At one point, Super Buu screamed and was starting to tear the fabric of space-time. If Kid Buu was stronger than Buhan, then Vegeta and Goku wouldn't have been putting up nearly as well as of a fight. It's like fusion wouldn't have been a question at that point. It's like if that was the case, then Goku would have just gone Super Saiyan 3 against Buhan, and it would have been the same fight as I guess against Kid Buu. It's like they had to fuse into Vegito. Buu Saga, while still pretty good, there was points in it where it was ugh. We moved smoothly into Dragon Ball Super. One of the best things about Super, I'd say, on my list I talk about is like you should watch the first 2 episodes of Super and then watch Battle of Gods, just cause mainly well, the first thing you see when you watch the first episode of Super is Kyle Herbay saying, previously on Dragon Ball Z, and that's just amazing. Super was interesting, again, because I cut out the anime versions of the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F arcs and preference to the movie versions. The way I did it was interesting, because again, I watched the first 2 episodes of Super, then I watched Battle of Gods. I did forget that Battle of Gods does start with a soft recap of Z. Also, I know there's a thing there because it's like Battle of Gods also starts with Beerus waking up, where in Super he's already awake. For me, it still works out. I chose to fast forward through the Beerus scenes in the first 2 episodes of Super. It makes sense going into Battle of Gods, but it does blend really well, just because, you know, at the end of episode 2 of Super, Goku's, like, you see him go to King Kai's planet, put on that, like, training outfit, start training on Battle of Gods, he's already there. So it's like, in my opinion, it's like that flows amazingly well. But Battle of Gods, yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched it, and I was watching it, I was like, oh, this movie is so good. I will say, though, there is one scene that I prefer where someone did the edit, putting the Bruce Faulkner music over Vegeta's That's My Bulma scene. I will always prefer that, but everything else in the movie was absolutely amazing. You know, I will not let you destroy my world. It's like that. Ugh. Sent chills down my spine. But yeah, after that I watched the in-between episodes, like it was episode 15 to 18 of Super, just seeing the little bit of Goku and Vegeta beginning their training with Whis, and then going into Resurrection F. I will say this about Resurrection F though, it's kind of a boring movie. Like, I'm gonna be kind of honest, there's a part of me that does want to say that as shitty as the animation is, like Resurrection F kind of works better as an anime arc than a movie. I mean, I'll always say though, the animation in the Resurrection F movie and everything is far superior, obviously. But there were many points in that movie where I was just like kind of even during the fighting, it's good setup for what comes later in Super, but then yeah, I then watched the rest of Super just as the show it was, from the Tournament of Destroyers to the Tournament of Power. It was the first time since the dub of Super started airing that I actually went through it all, and I'll definitely say, the Tournament of Destroyers and the Goku Black arc, the dub absolutely nails amazingly, and I love it. I forgot how long the Tournament of Power arc is, because technically, yeah, it starts in episode 77 and goes to 131, but it's like over half of the show is the Tournament of Power, and the first half is 4 other arcs. Like, the Goku Black arc was only 19 episodes. Also, I'll just say this, I love the Goku Black arc. I know it's confusing as shit and there's like some weird stuff in it, but for me it's one of those arcs where I can make it make sense in my brain, and also I just don't care. The voice acting and everything, the action in it, it's like I just loved it. I love Goku Black as a villain. Zamasu, I also like, not as much as Goku Black, but I like the foil that he was for Goku Black. And while it was a very disappointing ending, I still loved the arc overall. But going into the Tournament of Power, I will say there is a part of me that still prefers the Japanese version of the Tournament of Power as opposed to the English dub, because again, this is the first time since the dub was airing that I went through the Tournament of Power in English. While the voice actors all do a pretty good job, especially like obviously like Chris Sabat and Sean Shamel and all like the Universe 7 team, like there is the part of me that prefers the English or the Japanese version, mainly because of the fact that they dub the 2 best songs in Tournament of Power. They decide to ruin it by putting it in English, which that hurt. I did the smart thing, which was, well, one, I always skipped the intro, which I never would have done if it was in Japanese, but the 3 scenes where they play the vocaled version of the Ultimate Battle, which is when Ultra Instinct Goku fights Jiren, Ultra Instinct Goku is charging his Kamehameha against Kefla, and then when Goku, Frieza, and 17 are fighting Jiren at the end. Right when I got to those scenes in the English dub, I went over to YouTube and looked up the edits that people did where they added the Japanese version of Ultimate Battle, and I was like, yes, this is much better. Because that's one thing I'll never get. It's like when they did the scene of Goku going Kaioken against Hit where they played the opening, they didn't dub it then. Why they dub it for the Tournament of Power doesn't make sense. Overall though, it's like the Tournament of Power was still pretty freaking kick-ass. While Jiren, not really a compelling antagonist, again, it's one of those things where it's like he doesn't necessarily need to be, because again, he's not a villain. I mean, there's a part where he is. He's not necessarily meant to be complex, he's just meant to be just this barrier that's meant to be overcome in this tournament. Even still, he gave way for a lot of amazing fights in the tournament, and moments and character development. That all gave way to Dragon Ball Super Broly, which again, if you haven't, check out my video that I posted a couple days ago where I did my reaction and ended out my binge of the anime. It was great development because in the Tournament of Power, it's like it's Goku and Vegeta finally learning to work together, and then going into Broly where they fight side by side and fuse and whatnot. It's something that I really hope they go forward in as Super returns next year, and then the movies that come out going forward. But yeah, that pretty much was my experience with this Dragon Ball binge, my 4-month binge experience. And while I've talked about it's like the manga chapters, for this, I'm not really touch on them. It's like Moro and Granola, they're cool arcs. Moro's not one of my favorite arcs. It has cool moments and whatnot. Mainly for Vegeta. It's just one of those arcs where they try to return to like form kind of, but they kind of sacrificed a lot of development in my opinion. Goku and Vegeta just came off an arc where they were fighting together in a movie, but then in the Moro arc they didn't fight together at all. The Granola arc starts really strong, it kind of wavers a little bit. I like what they do with Bardock, but I'll touch more on that in the future if it ever gets animated. Because there's the part of me where it's just like, yeah, it'd be cool if they animate the Moro and Granola arc, but at this point it's like, it won't be surprising in terms of story, because at this point, pretty much most Dragon Ball fans know about Moro and Granola and all that. There's a part of me that kind of hopes they just sort of skip over it and do something new. Because that was one of the best parts about Super, is the fact that other than the episode leaks that we would get, you couldn't get it spoiled by like reading the manga or anything. It's like you had to just watch it through the anime. Whatever they decide to do, I'm here for it nonetheless, and if they do weekly anime episodes, I will react to them on the channel. I will do that because I fucking love Dragon Ball. But yeah, going through all that, this was amazing setup for Super Hero, which I'm going to be seeing tomorrow, and I really cannot wait. Stay tuned for my review of said movie, which will be coming out within, try my best to get it out as soon as possible, because I will definitely want to talk about that. But this was my experience with my binge of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball Super. Thank you all for joining me on this. I'm Lancer. Thanks for watching.